Welcome to this episode of Beat Teacher Burnout. I'm so glad you have come to listen this week. And I have a special guest today, James, who is going to talk about, he's actually a lawyer and he's also into personal growth. And I discovered him on LinkedIn because he shares what for me is gold dust. So welcome, James, Jim.
Call me
Which do
Jim.
you prefer? Jim,
Jim is great, yeah.
welcome.
Thank you,
Okay.
Rowena. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, it's great to have you here. And I love the fact that you're in the States. We can still connect. And we have so many people listening who are going to want to know what your experience is of life, of burnout, of the overwhelm, and then what strategies you have found that have really helped.
Sure, yeah. So we can go along, and then as we go along, if you have any questions, just put them to me, and we can go off on a branch on that. But to give you a little context, to give the audience a little context, you mentioned I'm a lawyer. I'm a litigation attorney by training, and I've been doing that for 30 years, and then a part-time creator right now on LinkedIn. I had a side hustle business in telehealth for about 6 years, 7 years. And part of that product was building out a self-development, personal development course, multi-module course for our patients. So the doctors worked with the patients kind of on the medical side of some issues. And then I had that. So it's a topic that interests me a lot. And then in terms of my experience with burnout, being a litigation attorney, if you look at the statistics, it's huge. It's very common in our industry. They turn to weird coping mechanisms. Lawyers have a very high rate of substance abuse. That's a classic coping mechanism for stress and burnout. And then there's the way that we bill our clients is typically by the hour. So if you work in a firm, they have to be very systematized in making sure that the lawyers meet their time budgets. So we have required hourly minimums, and they just pile on the work, and then on top of all that, each case, at least here in California, but I think it's true in a lot of other states now and maybe in other jurisdictions, they set deadlines to get work done against a trial date. And so if you blow those deadlines, some of them, it's not a big deal. Others, it could be malpractice. It's like the patient dies on the table. So you can imagine it's pretty stressful. What I've learned to do as a core philosophy, this will be true for any scenario, personal relationships, social life, work life, is assertiveness, is being assertive with the environment around you. So let's just take a piece and talk about being assertive with people. My approach is to learn to say no. No has to be the concept. It has to be embedded in your messaging, and it has to be embedded in your style of thinking, your habits of thinking, because that's going to be that's almost like the little magic gem that throws off powers. It's from that seed that you can then branch off into other ways of being assertive. So we start with no. And with that, you can start to draw good boundaries, right? So we get into the concept of boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, you'll be eaten alive, right? If you can't draw a boundary, you'll be eaten alive.
Okay. So let me go back so if we're starting with no in our assertiveness journey, what teachers say to me and what was my issue, both as a teacher and a deputy head leader, was that I didn't want to let people down. And I also felt that I was never good enough. So if I was saying no, it looked like I was weak or a failure. And teachers say the same.
That's true. A lot of people feel that, but there's an opposite effect. If you say no tactfully, and I'm going to go off on a footnote here too on social dynamics. So we're going to go a little deep. But if you say no, you actually strengthen your persona around other people. They respect people that say no. You lose respect points by being a yes person. Yes man is sort of the phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but I don't like to say, I want to include everybody. So I say yes person. But if you're a yes person, you basically lose your identity. Imagine saying yes to every request that was ever made of you. Literally every request, every email that came through, everything that came through. and you said yes to it, let me go down, you would just turn into confetti. You would cease to exist as a person. So no is just, it has to be part of pretty much everything you say. And psychologically, when we get into social dynamics between people, a group, the person that says no tactfully is going to actually generate more respect. And so that's where people get hung up, I think, is they feel like, well, if I say no, I'm going to come across as weak. You're not. You're going to come across as someone who is going to be thought of immediately as, wow, that person said no to me. Okay. And if you can back it up with a reason, like my plate's already too full, or I've got other commitments, who's going to criticize you for that? And if they do criticize you for that, then you know you're not hanging out with the right person. So that's where I get into social dynamics too, is it's not only no actually works as a strengthening factor for respect, even though you might think otherwise. So that's like a habit of thinking. That's like a myth you got to like dispel. But also how you say no, right? If you say no in a very assertive way, just like no, not in a sarcastic or mocking kind of way, but just in a very straightforward, deliberate way, polite way, but enunciate it clearly, then that's going to come across so much better. It's going to land so much better on the ears of the person, the requester, than if it's stated in a snotty way or a sarcastic way or an aggressive way or anything like that. So tonality in your voice, speaking up, maybe backing it up with a lot, not a lot, with a little bit of a reason, that goes to the impact on the hearer. And I spent a lot of time studying social dynamics. And when we talk about social dynamics, little micro movements of our body, like right now I'm moving around, even my posture, my voice, my rate of speech, my intonations going up and down, that kind of thing. We don't pay attention to these things, but they have a massive impact on the people around us. And so this is another maybe psychological hack, right? So if you can master your social dynamics and then master your emotional IQ, which is a topic I've just now thrown into the mix, you're going to be able to very gracefully move through an environment with these beautiful boundaries that people will respect, and then they'll respect you, and life will become infinitely easier for you.
I love that, because the other thing I've found in the recent sort of months and years, while I've been studying this and working on myself as I learn and teach it, is that as I learn to say no, it's very empowering to me to know there are areas that I can control in my life that I thought I couldn't, but I can.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the more you say no, you're being respectful toward yourself too. And so that's another area where I think a lot of people get hung up. Is I'm going off again into another little area that fascinates me, is social conditioning, right? So we are what I teach in my old modules are going to be updated for this new product I'll be having introduced probably within 3 to 6 months, is less than that, hopefully, is that, there's no escaping social conditioning. My definition, just so you know, of social conditioning, it borrows from behaviorism, right? Which is, we're surrounded by stimuli that act as miniature rewards and punishments, and they shape our behavior, right? So we, as kids, like in high school or younger, we want to fit in kind of thing. And the teacher can punish us with just like a frown or reward us with a gold star. And that shapes our behavior. And we start to do those things that give us that acceptance and that kind of thing. So you can never escape social conditioning. It's cultural, it's shaped by the media, it's shaped by our parents, our friends, it's everywhere. But you can harness it. And by being aware of it and knowing how to avoid what's bad for you, or kind of creating a little fracture between you and this wave of social conditioning, then you're going to have more agency. You're going to have more free choice. And one of the things that's been embedded and drilled into all of us is this people pleasing thing. This idea that we have to please other people, that we have to be there for other people, that we have to put their needs ahead of our own. Just to borrow from the law, they've got in the law, there's a thing called the fiduciary duty. So like a doctor owes his patient or her patient a fiduciary duty. That means you have to place their interests equal to or above your own. Lawyers owe a fiduciary duty to the client. I have to put the client's like a little child. I have to shepherd the client through a very difficult, dark forest. It's like I'm at one end of the jungle and I've been hired to take him to the other end of the jungle, and I'm the only one that knows how to get through. And I have to look out for that client. And this concept is pervasive of putting that person's needs ahead of our own, and it becomes pathological. And that competes with this idea of being assertive. And so you kind of have to, for some people, you kind of have to say it's okay to be selfish, be selfish. Be selfish for yourself.
That's pretty tough. So if the majority of people listening to this are probably teachers, teaching assistants, leaders, and there's quite a few parents listening, actually, we give out all day to the students. Right. And we are empaths generally. We have compassion fatigue because we are giving out so much of ourselves that there's nothing left.
That's true. Yeah. And that's when you feel that real burnout, when you're just like, I'm completely drained. And, one way to sort of spot if you've gone too far over this people pleasing, socially conditioned response to give and give and give is if you feel like when you come back at the end of the day, or you finally get a little time, like class is over or whatever, you feel like you just have little torn up pieces. Some of the people in the self-help space call it time confetti. You just have like little pieces of time left over for yourself, and they're shredded and this is all conceptual and by analogy, but they're left on the floor. And it's like, well, where'd my time for my workout, which I need to prep for the workout and put on my gym clothes and go work out for an hour and come back and take a shower. That's maybe an hour and a half thing. That's just been shredded up now and it's in little pieces. That's a sign that you are now way overcommitted. And, or I missed an important meeting with some friends, or I was too exhausted to go do that. Or I've got a 6-month-old son, and sometimes I feel kind of bad because my wife is doing all the heavy lifting with him, figuratively and literally. He's a bigger kid at 6 months. And I want to spend time with him, but I get sucked in with these cases. So I see what can be happening with teachers. My sister was a teacher. My family was either teachers or lawyers, so I know what you guys are going through. And
so how do you balance that then? Because you're saying that, even you're so aware of all this personal growth area, and yet you're still struggling to get enough time with your son, because teachers say to me that they get home and they're empty. There's nothing left, and there's not a lot of time either, but nothing in the emotional tank left.
Well, a lot of that has to do with things not in your control, right? So now we're talking about, if you're a teacher, or in my situation, my current position as a lawyer is I work for a law firm. And so I don't get to choose the workload so much. I have control to an extent by pushing dates out and working with opposing counsel, or I can delegate stuff. And that would be one strategy. If you're a teacher and you've got an assistant or anybody else, you can bring in a student who's eager, or a couple, delegate stuff to them. Take that stuff off your plate is a great strategy. I can do that, but that still doesn't keep the boss, the owners of the firm. They're the ones that have this flow of business coming in that need people like me to, what I tell people I do, this will sound funny, but I imagine myself on a big fishing boat that goes out for 6 months or a month or 2 months and catches tuna or whatever. And they have all those people in the hall and an assembly line. I just cut and clean the fish. And if they catch a ton of fish, it's more work for me to do. I don't have much control. I can't say, hey, stop it, kind of thing. I can maybe say, hey, bring some more workers on the line, or, let's do some stuff down here to slow my work pace. But there's only so much control. So I would say look for smaller ways that are within your control to pace the work. Delegation, not taking on stuff, like identifying what truly matters to impart to your students, and cut away the rest. Those would be just a couple of top of mind things that come into my head.
Yeah, I love that. I was in a wonderful secondary school actually today, and we were looking at their to-do list, and they all wrote out their to-do list for me, their top 5 things, I think. And then we looked at, were they urgent, were they important, were they both? And actually it was looking at, are they living completely sort of on the edge of their seat, everything is reactive and stressful, or are they able to be a bit more proactive and look at what's important and what aligns with them and what matters to them as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one for the lawyers too, is are you reactive and always bound, just like, oh my God, I got to deal with this. Everything's like last minute. We call it 9 alarm fire kind of thing, which is like there's a fire, everybody jump out of bed, go put out the fire department rushes. Or are you seeing things coming down the horizon? And, some people that you could take 2 people and you could put them in identical environments. Let's say you could do like a little experiment, so a sociology experiment, put them in 2 law firms or put them in 2 classrooms. And you clone the kids, you clone the classroom, you have everything's identical. The only 2 variables are the 2 different people. One person will still get into a reactive mode. The other person will get into being proactive. So you definitely can control that. I think if we're going to go back now to strategies to avoid burnout, it's mindset. And I know mindset kind of sounds a little woo-woo. It's like this and that. It's very strong. And it was, to my knowledge, the first time it was ever coined and used in the literature was by Carol Dweck. Are you familiar with her? Yeah. So she came up with the growth versus fixed mindset. I think she's still at Stanford. She's kind of toward the end of her career, but that's like her grand opus, whatever the term is, her opus. That was the big thing she did to contribute to psychology. And it's still cited to this day. It's still popular in the self-help community. And you can actually take mindset. It's not just growth or fixed. You can use other kinds of mindsets too. And so if you have a mindset of being proactive, if you have a mindset of saying, look, I can get this stuff done. I can see stuff on the horizon coming at me. I'm going to plan for that. And this actually makes it a lot easier because another little, I don't know, this will sound a little corny, but my mom used to always say, a stitch in time will save 9. Nobody really knows what that refers to. It refers to a piece of cloth or a clothing like this threadbare t-shirt that's my favorite. I'm actually wearing today. It's very threadbare. I've had it for years. My wife is like, when are you going to throw this thing out? And I'm like, don't throw that out. But, if it were to get a tear, I'd be like, stitch it, because one stitch now will save 9 later. And so same thing with things that are coming down the pike. If you can spot like a problem, if you got a student who's going to be a problem, and maybe you have the way to have that student put into a different program, or if you have that student has special needs, you can start to plan those rather than wait for the problem to be right in your face. That's being reactive. And then I have another thought, but I don't want to keep rambling on without you having some questions.
Go ahead. Let's have the other thought.
So another strategy you can think of. So we're talking about being proactive, having a personal agency, planning, being a little selfish for yourself, and just pushing things out of the way. It's okay to say no. Here's another strategy, though, is to not be so worried about over planning things and to trust your instinct. All right. So this borrows from trauma surgery, right? So trauma surgeons are trained to be reactive in the moment and so they've got a surgical field. They've got a guy who came in on an accident who's in critical condition, who without attention now could pass. And so everybody goes into this mode and they've trained for it. So it becomes very instinctual. And if you fall back on your instincts and you imagine that you're a trauma surgeon working in the surgical field, and as things kind of crop up, like all of a sudden there's a bleeder that opens up, you got to clamp that down. Oh, now I just discovered this over here. I know exactly what to do. I take care of that. As these problems unravel, you just deal with them and trust your instincts that you're going to be able to do it okay. And then what the trauma surgeons typically do, they know to come back to the patient later. So they kind of prioritize, let's do the stuff that's going to be life-saving to get to stabilization. Then I'm going to come back to this patient the next day because they're going to be in the hospital, and I'm going to find out what else could be wrong with them. And I'm going to bird dog those issues. And then I'm going to come back and do a third layer until we get the person up to the point where they just have to go back to their regular doctor or somebody who's going to treat maybe a chronic problem. And so you can do that too, just sort of like as these things come at you, just have the confidence to deal with them in the moment on an instinctual basis, and then move on to the next thing, and then prioritize, and then come back if you need to look at it the next level, and then look at the next level to kind of perfect it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking about having the confidence in your abilities, actually.
Yeah.
I think, you're good at this. You can do it.
Yeah. And as a lawyer, I can jump in. I've done so many. Here's a good example. I've done a lot of depositions. That's where I question a witness under oath. I've done, I don't know, 300 expert depositions of doctors, right? So I do injury defense work for insurance companies mostly. And I get to take questions some of the top doctors in their field. And I have to learn their stuff. And the first 50 I did, it was kind of scary because I didn't know what I was doing. I'd study up I'd go to the biomed libraries at the local universities, medical schools. I'd study all the concepts, and I studied them on YouTube and all this stuff. And now I can pretty much just roll out of bed and take a doctor's deposition. I just have the confidence to do it. And when a question comes my way, when a response comes my way, I know what thread to go down, what questions to follow up on. It's instinctual. And you'd be surprised at how much instinct in a particular field you've built up, right? So if you're a teacher and you've been doing it 10 years, you've got plenty of experience. You've got plenty of instinct on how to deal with the kids, how to put out fires easy, that kind of thing. And, rather than get stressed out, and I remember I had a teacher once that just got overly stressed out. I think I was in 7th grade. And the kids actually would goad him. They goaded him because they knew they could get a reaction out of him. And he just didn't know how to deal with them. And then there was other teachers that just knew perfectly how to deal with us. If we got a little out of control, it's just, they knew how to neutralize it quickly and put out the fire.
Yeah. I'm so interested going back a little bit, though, because I think there's a real, there's probably a link between the confidence and the assertiveness, because, you can have a teacher who's done it for 10, 20, 30 years, still lacks confidence in their abilities, even if they're good. And actually also linking with the assertiveness, because there's not that assertiveness there, then they can't put themselves forward and perhaps ask for the help they need, get the support they need, and perhaps also say no. So it's all very entangled, isn't it? And it maybe comes back to that assertiveness requirement that we started with.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, and I say this in my old product, which I review every now and again. It's just good because it reminds me of my own philosophies. But I found when I was making that product, I found that all the concepts that I laid out in detail, they all interrelated. And I started seeing how they're linking back. So then I was telling my audience in these recordings, I'm like, do you see this piece links back to this piece? We talked about this one here. It all does interrelate. And the word entanglement is a good one that you use because it highlights how it could be overwhelming for you. But if you can reframe that, so this is another technique, it's just reframing this thing and calling it interrelated, and it just needs a little sorting out, you will see how these all connect. But I would choose like a safe harbor. I would choose like your main island piece mentally, and that's going to be assertiveness. And there it's going to be home. Like if you're thinking you're a little baby and regressing back to where you want to be, where it's most comfortable, probably in your mama's arms, or wherever else. I always tell our son, I'm like, he can't talk yet, but I'm like, the top level of the house is, we call it the loft. This is safe. You're going to be happy here. Maybe that's going to be his like place where he goes to. It's no. It's saying no. It's that's how you would describe being assertive to a caveman. It's like, okay, if I can't get anything across to you other than this concept, it starts with the concept of no, and thinking about how to embed that into creating boundaries and being more respectful to yourself, how that creates respect in other people, and sort of being assertive to, if you have sort of two people inside you, you've got that inner critic and that churning voice, shut that thing down by saying no to it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Jim, I could talk to you for ages. If people want to find out more about you or connect with your top tips, which I access all the time, how would they best do that?
Well, so I'm on LinkedIn, and I post Monday through Friday, and I'm actually going to be I'm going to cohort. I'm going to be stepping up my LinkedIn game to be producing a lot better content with better engagement is the goal. And starting in January, February, March, hopefully you'll start to see a lot more engaging content, but more educational content. So I'm going to have some better, not just quick flybys, which are great for quick takeaways, but I'm going to have even more stuff. So LinkedIn will be the place so you're not going to find me on Facebook. You're not going to find me on Instagram, and probably not on X for a little bit, but find me at James Kamansky on LinkedIn, and just read my post there. You can DM me and I'll respond to you. And the topics, the pillar topics are personal growth and kind of a few things that fall under that. I'm into lifestyle design. Productivity is a big topic for people on LinkedIn, and I talk about that in leadership. But I think life is, if you're avoiding burnout, it's a sign and a signal that you want to get back to, your own personal hobbies. What makes you happy? That's you're entitled to be happy in this world. You're not a slave to somebody else. You're not put on this planet to give all of your energy to somebody else or something else or some employer. You're entitled to live a happy, fulfilling life. And that's where some people, that's why I say it's okay if you have to think about being selfish, if that has to be infused into your thinking a little bit to help you get there, then be selfish, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Why not? I think that's great. And we need to hear that, because it's almost, we need permission. And I would just say that a couple of my favorite things that you've posted on have been how to simplify your life. And you've talked about habits that steal your energy and steps for building resilience, which for me and my listeners, I think those are all real keys for beating burnout. So Jim, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.